Imagine if the most popular rifle in America, the AR-15, was declared outside the protection of the Second Amendment and your possession of those rifles was no longer lawful. We have seen that plenty of states have tried to do that. They put in place state rifle bans, and we have plenty of localities and counties that have done the same thing. There's been a challenge to that, and now this has officially made its way once again to the United States Supreme Court. And the question that Supreme Court is now being asked to finally answer are these types of AR-15 bans constitutional, or should they be struck down once and for all nationwide? Now, real quick, if you're watching this channel, then obviously it's safe to say that you care about the Second Amendment and your rights. Now, here's the thing, even law-abiding gun owners are ending up in jail because they make a bunch of critical mistakes. And those are mistakes that you don't even realize that you're making or that you don't understand that they're illegal. So I put together a free resource called the Legal Survival Guide. It's aimed to help you guys avoid all of those traps that maybe you could fall in. It takes about 2 minutes to read. It's just a simple PDF, and it really could save you years behind bars. I made it to help you guys, again, completely free to download using the link down below. It's just something that I wanted to provide to you guys for free so that you can have it in your phone or maybe print it out. And there's a little card also in there that you can put in your wallet to give you additional resources to help you in situations. Obviously, not meant to be legal advice. I'm not your attorney. This isn't an attorney-client relationship, but I wanted to provide you guys some free resources to prevent you falling in some bad situations. Again, if you're interested, click the links down below. It's completely free to do. All you have to do is enter your email to get that free PDF. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing a critical rifle ban challenge that is now back in front of the Supreme Court. This case is Viramontes versus Cook County. And the petitioners in this case are individual citizens along with toy organizations like Second Amendment Foundation. They are challenging Cook County's ordinance, which makes it a crime to sell, transfer, or even possess so-called assault weapons, simply AR-15s, AK-47s, and then they also have that term cover about 100 other types of rifles by name, again including AR-15s and AKs and other platforms as well. Now, this is just not a simple ordinance that does not have penalties attached to it. Violating the ordinance can mean having your firearms seized, fines also that start all the way from $5,000 and up, and even jail time as well if you simply violate this ordinance. This case tries to leverage recent statements also made by Justice Kavanaugh, which he issued in the denial of the recent Snope rifle ban case that went to them last term. In that denial last term, Justice Kavanaugh said that, the time would come soon where the Supreme Court would need to take up this critical rifle ban issue, potentially magazine ban, cases as well. And he indicated that they would potentially do that in maybe the next term or two. And the plaintiffs now push this case as the proper vehicle and the case that should essentially fulfill that promise, and the Supreme Court should take up this critical review. Now, here's what happened in this case and how it has now wound up in the Supreme Court. Essentially, back in 2021, this lawsuit was filed in a federal district court in Chicago, and the petitioners challenged the county's ban under the Second and 14th Amendments. Now, in 2024, while the case was pending, Illinois passed a statewide assault weapon ban. We've talked about it before. That is the Protection of Illinois Communities Act, also known as PICA, and essentially overlapped with Cook County's restrictions on AR-15s and similar rifles. Around the same time, the 7th Circuit decided another case called Bevis versus Naperville, upholding Illinois' law and claiming that AR-15s were too militaristic in nature, and because they were militaristic in nature, they are not protected arms. They ruled that firearms useful in military service could be essentially banned by a state or a locality, and so they upheld those restrictions based on that whole military use test. The district court reviewing this case, the Viramontes case, found that they were bound by that earlier 7th Circuit precedent, and so they ruled against the plaintiffs. The district court then issued a summary judgment in favor of Cook County. Now, in 2025, right after the Snope petition was denied review by the Supreme Court, this case was pending in front of the 7th Circuit, and I believe it was that day or the day after, suddenly the 7th Circuit decided that they were going to affirm what the lower court said in this case. They simply said that they're following their precedent in the 7th Circuit, and they're going to uphold what the lower court said. It leaned heavily on that prior Bevis case that I mentioned, treating AR-15s as essentially the civilian version of M16s and therefore outside the protection of the Second Amendment. This has now led the plaintiffs here in this case to petition for Supreme Court review once again, and they're pushing them to finally once again take up a rifle ban and strike down these types of rifle bans in counties, states, and essentially settle this once and for all nationwide. Now, first in the petition, they argue that the circuit courts are split and deeply confused on how to apply Heller and Bruen when it comes to these types of rifle bans. Some courts say AR-15s are arms, but they can still be banned anyways. And then others claim that they are simply just not arms at all, and therefore they're not protected. And so they uphold the rifle bans based on saying that these rifles are not arms. Petitioners say that the Supreme Court needs to clarify that all firearms, including semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and AKs, are arms and under the Constitution's protection. Second, the petitioners introduced surveys, production numbers, and sales data to show that tens of millions of AR-15s and other rifles are currently in circulation. They are used for home defense, target shooting, hunting, and other purposes, and therefore they're also in common use for lawful purposes, and they're protected under the Second Amendment. They state that if the Second Amendment does not protect the most widely owned and used rifle in the nation, then what does it actually protect? Third, they point out that Cook County and the Seventh Circuit rely on the idea that AR-15s are military firearms, that they're militaristic in nature. But Heller, they state, never said that guns can be banned simply because they're useful in military service. Instead, the only historical limitation recognized by the Supreme Court is on weapons that are both dangerous and unusual. AR-15s, by contrast, are common, popular, and overwhelmingly used for lawful purposes like self-defense, hunting, and target shooting. The useful and military service analysis that was used by the Seventh Circuit and other circuit courts that have used that same type of analysis was never part of Heller, was never part of the Bruen analysis, and should be outright rejected by the Supreme Court and struck down. Fourth, the petitioners argue that under the Seventh Circuit's reasoning, lawmakers can ban every firearm except for specific handguns that were potentially mentioned in Heller. That would effectively just straight out neuter the Second Amendment and leave it vulnerable to the complete erosion. Essentially every single legislative session in a state, they can just chip away at banning more firearms, going down the line of what type of firearms that they want to ban, and then open it up potentially for one day Congress to try to do the same thing as well. They point out how the defiance after Bruen and the inaction by the Supreme Court is causing this type of situation, and it will continue until the Supreme Court decides to finally step in, like Kavanaugh stated, and strike down this type of rifle ban, magazine ban, and just the outright defiance of what happened after Bruen. Finally, they argue that this case is a very clean case, it's clear, it's on the final merits, and it's the perfect type of case for the Supreme Court to finally take up. The firearms at issue are AR-15s. They state that that is America's rifle, and there is no factual dispute about how popular these rifles are. There are multiple circuit splits on this issue of rifle bans. There's splits on whether or not these types of AR-15s and similar semi-automatic rifles are arms. So there's plenty of circuit courts that have split on this issue. Millions of citizens and Americans are affected by this, and the Supreme Court intervention is way overdue, and that is recognized by Kavanaugh in the denial of Snopes, saying that in the next term or two, they will have to address this issue. So at its core, this case asks for the Supreme Court to finally step up and address one of the main questions that they've been called to answer for many years, essentially whether or not these types of arms are protected under the Second Amendment. The petitioners state clearly that if the AR-15 isn't protected, then most firearms are not protected, and the right to bear arms itself is essentially useless. Now, this isn't just a question relevant for Cook County and just the state of Illinois. It's a question that impacts every state and every American gun owner who has these types of rifles. From New York to California, you've had certain states that have just outright banned these. But as we've seen, more and more states are adopting these rifle bans. We've seen Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and others take up these type of rifle bans. And it's only a matter of time before this spreads even further. So it's finally time for the Supreme Court to stay true to their promise, step up, and address this issue. So as we get more information, as this develops, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to simply subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armscholar.com. Over there, we have the free legal guide that I mentioned. And then also over there, we have channel merch deals and all that you can check out as well. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.